This week on The Destination Angler. So when you were in high school, you're a big guy, right? Did you play football?
I didn't, man. I fished.
You fished?
I could have. Yep, I could have. A lot of people said you could have been a football player. I'm 6'2" and 280, and probably could have been a defensive lineman or even an offensive lineman. But in high school, I wasn't quite as big but tall. I probably could have been a tight end or something in high school. But
the coach is probably walking by in the halls and going, "Dude, why aren't you playing football?"
Yeah, and not coming anywhere near me because I probably smelled like fish. So
that was Josh McQueen from Fish, Ohio Outfitters. Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of The Destination Angler, brought to you by Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping you find new trout waters so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. By Adams Built Fishing Gear, the trusted source for quality fly fishing gear built to last at an affordable price. And by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. And by Got Fishing, crafting world-class fly fishing adventures specially designed to your level of experience and budget. Hey, up next on the Destination Angler, we're headed to the Indian River area on the central Florida coast for redfish and snook on the fly. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode of the Destination Angler on carp fishing. Yep, I said carp fishing on North Sterling Reservoir in Colorado with Jeff Wagner, who's the CEO of Ross, Able, and Airflow. Hey, have you ever wondered what all the fuss is about carp fishing? Well, this is the episode for you. You won't want to miss these shows. Hey, and if you like the show, be sure to hit that subscribe button and please share this episode with a buddy. Want to be the first to know about new episodes? Well, head on over to the Destination Angler Podcast website and become a subscriber. You'll be entered to win a full year subscription to Trout Routes Pro and a 3-month subscription to Anglers Coffee. What a deal. We'll select a winner in the next episode. And our lucky winner this week is Jeff from Yonkers, New York. Congrats, Jeff, and thanks for listening. Hey, enjoy your Anglers Coffee and subscription to Trout Routes Pro. Be sure to check out our newest podcast called the Destination Angler Adventures Podcast, the podcast about life and fly fishing. We put you, the angler, center stage to tell your stories and share your adventures. Got an epic story you want to share? Well, drop me a line on Instagram or email. And today our destination is Northeast Ohio, otherwise known as Steelhead Alley, and the network of rivers and streams flowing into Lake Erie. And our guest is expert steelhead guide Josh McQueen, founder of Fish, Ohio Outfitters. The southern shore of Lake Erie offers some of the finest steelhead fly fishing in the world, where 30 to 40 fish days are an absolute possibility. An Ohio native, Jeff's lifelong connection to these waters led him from truck driving and construction to his true calling as a fly fishing guide. Today, Josh gives us a masterclass sharing his intimate knowledge of the fishery, the geology, the steelhead behavior, effects of water temps, stocking programs, flies and rigs that consistently produce, plus why he prefers dirty greenish water, and the all-important question, what the heck is a spate stream? As a bonus, Josh shares his surefire way to beat the crowds and why Ohio steelheaders should be thanking the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. Could this be the best lake-run rainbow fishery in the world? Will you be the judge? Let's hear from Josh. All right, well, Josh, welcome to the show.
hey, Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm not steelhead fishing today like maybe you've been steelhead fishing in the last couple of days, so I'd be doing better if I was, but how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I had a chance to rest today because we got some rain here. So it's a busy season, and I don't have too many days off this time of year, but I did get one today. When we get the big rains, that's our off days. So.
Oh, it is. Okay. And then following the big rains, you got some good runs then, don't you?
Yeah, that's typically what we're looking for. We need to get rains of some extent throughout the season to keep elevating the the rivers, and then of course when those rivers go up, then we get runs of the steelhead here. So
Right, right. And look from your Instagram page, Josh McQueen Fishing. It looks like you got some nice fish in the last couple days.
yeah, lots of fresh ones, and I think that's probably my favorite thing about fall season versus spring season is particularly early mid fall season, whatever. That's always kind of this time of year, mid November, getting into the later part of November. I mean, with each passing rain event, we just see a lot of fresh fish. You see more fresh fish in the fall than you do in the spring. We still get plenty of fresh ones in the spring, but the fall is predominantly bright silver. You've heard the term chrome. You know, we have the chrome
Oh
fish,
yeah.
so we're seeing a lot of those right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You got a picture of a really nice, very large chrome fish on your Instagram page. How big was that thing? That thing's huge.
The one I'm holding,
Yeah.
that one was 32 and a half inches, and I don't really keep a scale on the boat, but I'm sure with the belly on that guy, I think he made it well over the 10-pound mark, just considering that that was a pretty deep-bodied Chambers Creek strain fish. Those things really they get big, and that was out in the harbor prior to the rains. We were actually doing quite a bit of fishing in the harbors because that's where all the steelhead are staged up at and feeding before they go in, and so the lack of rain that we had, we did a lot more harbor fishing than I normally would on any given year this year. So
So they'll just stage up in these harbors waiting for some rain to bring the rivers up, huh?
yeah, it's kind of part of their life cycle. On the shoulder seasons, fall and spring, the bulk of the steelhead population, basically all of the ones that aren't in the rivers, are within a mile of the shoreline of the lake. They're not way out like they are in the summertime. And all the bait fish is there. You know, the right water temperatures are there. And if you go out in a boat right now, in and around the harbor breakwalls and going up the river channels, up the mouths of the rivers, and you have a nice sonar unit to look at, you would just see some of these places you can go into. The amount of bait that's under the boat just sort of chokes up the graph. I mean, it's just that thick, and it's a lot of shad
Really?
and a lot of emerald shiners. Yeah.
There you go. Well, man, I grew up in Toledo, which is, pretty close to Lake Erie. And I can remember when this lake got cleaned up in the 1960s and 70s and everything started to come to life, right? Like the walleye fishing started turning on. I read there's 90 million walleye in Lake Erie now. And you smallmouth bass. And I mean, Lake Erie is really loaded along with the steelhead fishing, but I guess people don't kind of realize it, do they?
I mean, there's a decent amount of people that realize that. I think there's a lot that haven't. When you go out and you see the walleye boats in the spring and stuff, those guys definitely have realized it. And then when you do come steelhead fishing here in the fall and spring, our rivers have gotten busier and busier. Every passing season, I wonder how many more people are going to show up. But that's just part of the development of the fishery, and it's not a bad thing. These people are all buying licenses,
Right.
and that just ensures that it's as tough as crowded rivers can be sometimes. I look at it differently. I look at it as a standpoint of if we have a lot of folks involved with this, then we're going to continue to be able to enjoy this for years to come.
Yeah. License fees are paying for steelhead smolt, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yep. That part of the money, the money. We don't have a trout stamp in this state, so the money to fund our hatchery in Castalia is coming from license sales, among some other things. They run a drawing lottery there on your license every year, where you can draw a day to take some kids and go fishing at a mile stretch of the creek where the hatchery is, where they just dump all the surplus fish, and
Oh, really?
it's pretty easy fishing. So they just sort of landlocked rainbows at that point. But yeah, I mean, back to your original point there. I mean, yeah, Lake Erie is pretty amazing. It's an inland ocean, and I would argue, obviously I'm biased because I'm from here, but I would feel comfortable arguing with anybody that it's ultimately one of the top freshwater, if not maybe the top freshwater fishery on the planet. I mean, I just can't think of something that's any better. When you look at the list of species and you look at the size caliber of those species, it's pretty amazing. Particularly, I would say, with the walleye, with the steelhead, with the smallmouth bass, those three species, their size and numbers in the lake are world class anywhere.
Yeah. What is it about Lake Erie that makes it such a fish factory?
That it's shallow. There's a statistic that we've talked about, or sometimes when I give speeches and talks in clubs that I've used for a long time, and other people use this, but it's a true statistic. Lake Erie biologically outproduces the other four Great Lakes combined. It's just because it's so shallow. When you look at Lake Michigan or Superior or Ontario, and even the bulk of Huron, even though it has some nice bays, when you look at the bulks of those lakes, you get a couple miles off a shoreline and you're in super, super deep water. And the farther out you go, it's crazy deep, and you're just sort of looking at a dead zone. I mean, you even get past where, I mean, when you're looking at 6, 7, 800 foot of water that some of those Great Lakes have, there's nothing living down in there
Right.
I mean, Lakers and some salmon, I mean, you may be 150, 200 foot deep on those fish in the summertime, but after that, and Lake Erie, its average depth throughout the whole lake, I think it's 28 or 29 feet or something like that is the average depth of Lake Erie. We have in the Western Basin, we have the island area, which is just a smallmouth factory, and it's also where the migratory walleye spawn on the reefs and two of the bigger rivers there. And so it's just producing crazy amounts of walleye and smallmouth bass. It's also a killer white bass fishery. Actually, I do a lot of, not to get off topic with the steelhead, but I do a lot of summer trips fly fishing in the lake around the islands, and it's just a nice experience where we sight fish for drum, we smallmouth fish, dragon crayfish patterns and stuff around the rocks, and then white bass. I target large groups of white bass. This year was the best white bass summer I've ever had. We had multiple days on 6 weights with clouser minnows, where if we would have, I can think of several days from this past summer, if we would have left every fish in the boat that we caught, we would have sunk it by noon.
Yeah. White bass can really, I mean, I used to fish for those up the Maumee when I was a kid. They used to run up the Maumee and we just line up and throw jigs out there, and guys would walk back with stringers full.
Yeah, they're a fun fish that groups up. They fight well, and Lake Erie's got particularly large ones. I mean, fish up to 18 inches are fairly normal.
Huh. So how are you going after the smallmouth? You're fishing around the islands, you say?
Yeah, I fish the islands a lot and some of the harbors in the springtime. You can go to the eastern end, east of Cleveland, between there and Conneaut, and catch them in the harbors in the spring, pre-spawn and post-spawn. But it's once the summer warms, the summer temps get up. The bass in the east tend to go pretty deep, sort of 20, 25, and maybe even 30 feet, which is sort of, you could get a fully sinking line down there, but it takes forever, and that's a pretty slow
Yeah.
process. Where in the
Right.
island area in the summer, those fish adapt to what they have, and they're living in the rocks, not the sand. And a lot of those rocks are in shallower water. So you'll still find adult smallmouth in the 10, 12 foot of water in the summertime.
Okay.
In the spring, you can fish sometimes 2, 3, 4 foot deep, especially the pre-spawn bite is really enjoyable to, because you can throw some pretty big, like we'll throw 4 inch, 4 and 5 inch bucktails and polar changers, like game changer flies, to them in the pre-spawn bite.
Okay. The sink tips?
We use a variety of lines. I always have everything from floaters, intermediates, sink tips, and fully sinking lines on the boat every day on the lake.
Okay. How about that? And did you say you're sight casting to some of these fish at times?
Yeah, the drum in the summer, freshwater drum. A lot of people know them as the sheep's head, and they've gotten a bad rap for years, particularly among the walleye and perch fishing communities, because when you're walleye and perch fishing, you're fishing to keep meat.
Right.
It's not really so much of a fun catch and release event and fighting the fish. It's more about filling up the cooler and the freezer. And so the drum tend to steal bait and get in the way. And so those walleye guys really, they get annoyed by the drum. But for a fly rodder, if you live in the Midwest or anywhere near the lake within a reasonable drive, and maybe you've got the time that you could get to the lake, but you can't quite come up with the time or even the dough to get to Florida, it'll scratch that saltwater itch, because there's flats all around the islands and the shorelines in the Western Basin where you can actually see these drum tailing. And so you need your real technical casts where you don't want to line them. You want to quarter off of their sight side, not behind them, and lead them by like 4 or 5 feet. And you're dropping crayfish patterns down onto the bottom right in front of them, and then you watch them come over and just sort of tail up on it. And it's a killer program. I mean, we spend many days out in the sun sight fishing drum around the islands and catching smallmouth, and we usually dock up at a waterfront restaurant for lunch, and it's a pretty good day.
Is Put-in-Bay still just wild as heck?
Yeah, I don't visit there too much. If I'm gonna hop on the island, I usually do Kelly's. It's a little bit more relaxing.
Okay. You had a roommate in college who was a cook at it's called the Chicken Pit on Put-in-Bay. I have no idea if it's still there, but he used to tell me some stories about
Yeah,
that
I
place.
couldn't
And,
tell you. I get over there and fish the island a little, but I think if I'm in the area, if I'm in the Bass Islands, I'll probably go to Middle Bass and dock up before I go to Put-in-Bay usually.
okay.
Less people, and there's a couple of cool places there, but Kelly's is kind of my usual bag. It's a nice place.
All right. Well, we'll save that. We'll save your top restaurant for the last question I ask on the show, right?
Sounds good.
Hey, anglers. If you've been listening to the podcast, you already know Trout Routes has mapped and classified over 50,000 trout streams covering the entire lower 48, including 350,000 hand-curated public access points marked and ready for you to explore. But I bet you didn't know about a brand new feature called Trout Lakes. With a flip of a filter, Trout Routes Pro users can see over 12,000 fishable alpine lakes in the lower 48. You can turn this layer on in the filters menu to open up a whole new set of trout fishing opportunities. You know, there's nothing more exciting than finding that new trout stream, lake, or access point. I'm a huge fan of Trout Routes because they make it so easy. Say goodbye to stumbling around country roads looking for your next spot. Because Trout Routes provides every detail you need for each stream or lake, including public and private bridges, stream flows, trail access, where to park, camping opportunities, boat ramps, and a new feature to calculate actual river miles. How cool is that? No service, no problem. You can save maps for offline use. With Trout Routes, I've found dozens of new streams and access points I never would have known about. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. Are you an avid angler in search of top-notch fly fishing gear that's easy on the wallet? Well, look no further than Adams Built Fishing Gear. Adams Built is the ultimate choice for anglers who prioritize quality, affordability, and style. Established in 2014, Adams Built has been the trusted companion for thousands of anglers, creating unforgettable moments on the water. Seasoned pros and beginners alike will love their lineup of lightweight and durable waders and wading boots, high-quality nets and fly rod starter kits, and meticulously designed fly boxes and outerwear. When I first heard about Adams Built, I have to admit I was a bit skeptical. Having run through many pairs of waders over the years, I wondered about their guarantee. So get this, folks, all Adams Built branded products are guaranteed to last, and Adams Built waders carry a lifetime repair or replace guarantee. You only pay shipping. Hard to beat that. So why not make Adams Built Fishing Gear your go-to choice? Check them out at a dealer near you or at adamsbuiltfishing.com. That's Adam Built Fishing, the trusted source for quality fly fishing gear. All right, so let's talk about steelhead. You were telling me before the show that the geography of this area creates these streams that it's a term I had not heard of before. You called them spate streams. And I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about all that.
Well, a spate stream by definition is a rapid drainage where they rise and fall very rapidly. They don't sustain flow well. These streams are predominantly draining just rainwater and snowmelt. They don't really have much, if any, groundwater influence to them. And so, like where you live, or even where I'm from in central Ohio, and all through various parts of the Midwest, or even in the mountains and the East tailwaters, whatever, we see rivers that fluctuate less in terms of, they might get really high, but they take a lot longer to come down. And when they do come down, if it doesn't rain, they last a lot longer. These rivers are not like that. They go up very quickly and rapidly to super high levels on a rain. And depending on obviously how much rain that is, I mean, an inch of rain will take some of the creeks and tributaries up there from basically no flow to sending logs and debris down them at a rapid rate.
Is that like what's that
Yeah.
CFS at a little creek? You talking about like 500-600 or?
Well, they all vary. It's all different on each one, but I mean, let's just say that I don't have any trouble throwing maybe a couple of these names out there because these are stocked rivers that you can find on any of the DNR site. That if you want to know where rivers to fish, that's pretty easy to find. But I'll just throw, say, a common one out there that everybody knows: the Rocky River. A good flow to fish the Rocky River at is somewhere between 2 and 450 is fairly standard fare over there. And you can fish it lower than that, or you can fish it sometimes higher than that, depending on the situation. But that's kind of your ideal number. Well, if the Rockies just fishing well and everything's good, and you go out one day and it's flowing at on the low end of the good side, 280. And then that night you're doing a 2-day trip and you're all excited about tomorrow. Well, this Gulf moisture comes up out of nowhere and builds and dumps an inch of rain on it, starting around, say, 10 o'clock at night when you're in your hotel room sleeping. The next morning when you get up, not only are you not going to be fishing, but the Rocky River is probably going to be somewhere between 2,500 and 4,000 cubic feet per second of water just on an inch of rain.
Really? Wow.
So they go up very, very rapidly. A lot of that has to do with too, if where the water table is, and is that ground soaked or is it dry? Right now, it's been a dry fall for us, so the rains that we are getting, they're not going up as high, the rivers, and they're not lasting as long because the ground is soaking that up. But that's a spate stream, by definition, is just rapid drainage, draining rainwater and snow melt. And every one of the rivers that get steelhead up there are just draining. There's a high ridge line just to the south of the shore, Lake Erie in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. And everything that drains to the north side of that ridge line, which would be heading into that would be the Lake Erie drainage, and everything that's on the south side of that tends to end up, at least in Ohio, tends to end up in the Ohio River drainage. So it's just a sharp high point. If you look at a topographical map, you see the topography, and that ridge gets higher and steeper as it goes to the east. So when you start on the western end, which is essentially the settling basin of the lake, right, the entrance of it,
Yeah.
western end, that ridge is not, well, there's not much of a ridge there at all until you get close to
Not much.
somewhere around Sandusky Bay. And then as that ridge progresses eastward, it just gets steeper and higher, and those spate streams get even more dramatic.
How do you deal with that, Josh? I mean, that sounds like you got to be bouncing around all these different streams up and down the coast out there.
That's exactly what we do, and it's probably one of the hardest things about fishing here, Steve, is you can have it in your mind that you're going to go somewhere and fish, and I want to check that river out. I'm going to do River X or River Y. I'm going to the Rocky, or I'm going to the Grand. Well, you can set your plans up a month ahead of time all you want, but the anglers that do well here, they're chasing water flow, they're chasing prime conditions, and it's just kind of funny. Something that I deal with a lot in the guide business here is I get the planners. I get the people that book with me that they are planners.
Yeah.
I don't have any trouble dealing with this fishery because my whole life I've been a very spontaneous guy. But the people that have to have everything in their calendar and their notebook, it's hard for them because I'll tell them, hey guys, you don't want to book a place to stay until basically right before the trip. I could probably make a safe call about 3 days out, but don't book a place to stay. And you should hear some of these folks over the years. Oh my gosh, man, we can't do that. We're not going to have a place to stay. What are we going to do? And I'm like, look, Interstate 90 runs parallel right through the entire length of Steelhead Alley.
Yeah.
What is Steelhead Alley? That's basically the geographical region between the Sandusky Bay and Buffalo, New York. And I-90 parallels the whole thing, and every exit has 4 or 5 or 6 hotels. And I do know there's some people that like Airbnbs. They don't want to be in a hotel, and I get that. And so maybe I'll try to put them in a central area. I've put my clients up. If they want an Airbnb, I'll suggest maybe like Geneva on the Lake. It's a nice little community to stay in. There's a state park lodge there among many Airbnbs in that town because in the summer it's a a tourism destination. And so there's a lot of Airbnbs there and a big state park lodge nearby. And that actually doesn't put you on any one river. If you stay in Geneva on the lake, you're on the lake, and there's actually only a couple of small creeks in the state park there. But what it does do is it centralizes you. It puts you within 35 minutes or less of 4 stocked rivers and probably over 25 or so unnamed smaller tributaries.
Huh, interesting. That would work for me.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a planner.
It's a good for planners. That would be my recommendation. I try to get people to hold off only because every once in a while there's a situation where the rain comes up and blows out everything in the east. This has happened. It's rare, but every single thing east of Cleveland is high in money. But for some reason, the Vermilion River on the west side, far west of Cleveland, is still fishable. Well, you just got a room in, say, Conneaut, and Vermilion is an hour and 40 minutes away. So you just got a room to get up and drive an hour and 40 minutes. So that's the hard part. It's a complex fishery. It's very conditions based. Not only do you need to be where a migratory fish is, but you got to have the right conditions. It's all about the right flows, the right water color.
Talk about that a little bit. Watercolor.
I think fishable generally, or good fishing's anything between 15 and I'd say 15 inches on up to maybe 35, 36 inches. Now that 35, 36 inches of visibility, 3 foot, that's getting even a little clear for my taste. You can find a number of guides up here that do well. One of my good buddies from the area that got his start guiding here for Steelhead, and he still comes back seasonally. Now he's actually full-time in Wyoming. And it's my buddy Dustin White that works for Ugly Bug Fly Shop in Casper, Wyoming. And Dustin is particularly, I think, because of a lot of his trout experience, he's an ace at clear water. He gets on the tiny nymphs and the lighter tippets, and he absolutely bangs them up. The lower and clear, if there's fish around, probably the better for Dustin. He just loves it. Me, I will admit, that is not my strong suit. I've actually made my entire career more so off of fishing water that people won't fish, higher and dirtier than most people will fish. Probably because I got my steelhead career started in the western tributaries.
Okay.
So west of Cleveland, and every one of those tributaries is over in that flat area we talked about. They're in that settling basin, and so they're farm runoff. And so they run really, really dirty compared to the others, and they take a lot longer to clear up.
Yeah.
And so I got my start over there and just got used to it. And if the flows aren't too bad, I don't really care if I've only got on some of those rivers maybe 8 or 10 inches of visibility. It's nothing that a big bright chartreuse piece of yarn won't fix. And I know exactly where I need to put that to get within 10 inches of their face. So I have no problem. I have no problem fishing that dirty water. Dirty water to me means I'm not going to fight the crowds today. And that's kind of my trick.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So to be effective at dirty water, you got to have those big, bright flies, but you also got to know, like you said, where the fish are, right?
Exactly where they are. Yep.
And it's because you've been through there a million times, and it's okay, this hole next to that log, boom, drop one in there.
Yep.
There's a fish.
Exactly. That's a big part of it, whether you're fishing dirty water or not, is just knowing exactly where they sit when they are there. Because again, in the early season, when the rivers aren't entirely filled up with fish from end to end, if we're still early in the migration, and I don't even know for a fact whether or not I've got fish in front of me or not, I know my presentation's right and my spot's right. And if we're not catching them, I move on.
Yeah, nothing home.
And so for me, like the dirty water too, I go back and touch on that, Steve. It's bigger, brighter flies, right? Like high vis chartreuse is my go-to when it's super, super dirty. As you come around into the 15, 16, 17 inch range, 18 inches of visibility, whatever, I'll go more to like steelhead orange, which is like a brighter orange. And then as you continue to clear, I just pick my fly selection, or I guess I'm specifically talking about egg patterns. I'm picking that based on just the watercolor. If it's 2.5 to 3 or more foot of visibility, and I am fishing an egg and haven't switched to small nymphs yet, then it's probably going to be white, cream, pale yellow, Oregon cheese, something a little bit less intrusive.
Okay. Super interesting. Hey, anglers. You've heard me talking about Angler's Coffee for quite some time now. And I have a question for you. Have you tasted it yet? Well, if you have, then you know what I'm talking about. It's darn good coffee, isn't it? Hey, if you're like me, tasting's believing. And believe me, this coffee tastes great. My wife and I are hooked on it. Angler's Coffee offers an impressive spectrum of flavor profiles, so there's something for everyone. You know, when you're spending a day on the water, you need a great cup of coffee to carry you through, like the Coachman's Blend. Named after the famous Royal Coachman, you'll love the design of the bag as much as the coffee. This blend of medium and dark roasted coffee from Central and South America produces a flavorful and smooth cup with notes of chocolate and baking spices and a smooth finish. Order some today and save 10% with a custom subscription like I did. You pick the coffee blends you want, and they're delivered right to your doorstep. And if you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. No kidding. A percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations in the fly fishing community. So put a smile on your face, just like I did, and give it a cast. That's Angler's Coffee. Tasting's believing. With so much information out there, it can get darn right confusing and even overwhelming to find the right fishing adventure. Sorting through all the options and fees can be quite the headache. Well, not anymore. I'm super excited to introduce Got Fishing. Got Fishing is a boutique booking agency for world-class fishing adventures around the world. They ensure that you are on the exact fishing trip that meets your skill level, budget, and desired experience. Whether you're a seasoned angler or new to the sport, Got Fishing's personalized service will help you decide which adventure is the best fit for you, your group, or even your business. Worry about fees? Worry no more. With Got Fishing, you won't pay anything extra because their services are entirely free for you. You see, Got Fishing exclusively partners with highly reputable outfitters who gladly compensate them for their services, ensuring a win-win situation. Explore the range of fishing adventures and learn more about the services Got Fishing provides at gotfishing.com. That's www.gotfishing.com. And check them out on Instagram, too. So, I fished with steelhead guys who use really small little egg patterns, and I've fished with steelhead guys who use pretty big ones. And is that all color dependent, visibility dependent, would you say?
Watercolor for sure. Yeah. Yep. Tinier, less bright flies in the clear water, bigger, brighter flies when it's dirty.
Okay. Are you fishing with anything other than egg patterns?
I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, brother.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I keep some stuff around. I keep some nymphs, like Princes, Copper Johns, Duracells, blow torches. I keep some of that stuff around for when it really gets clear, but most of the time I'm trying to chase that dirtier water that I was telling you about, not raging flows,
Yeah.
not muddy, just chalky 15. You can be 15 to 20 inches and I'm happy as I could be. 15 to 20 inches of visibility, the kind of greenish, olive, whatever. It's, it's starting to turn green from brown. And the yarn specifically, or the beads, some beads too sometimes for the win. I mean, you hear a lot of talk about the different flies, the white deaths and the buggers, and there's a number of other steelhead flies that have been developed over the years. For me, I just don't usually have any trouble putting yarn under a bobber and letting her fly.
Yeah, right. And are you doing anything special in terms of your rig at the bottom? Like, are you doing fluorocarbon? Are you, stacking a couple flies, 10 inches apart? What are you doing there?
Yeah, I could go over with you my steelhead rig. It's so basic. I love it.
Yeah.
One, I don't fish tapered leaders. I may have, depending on how many fly shop owners catch this podcast, I may have a mutiny on my hand, but I don't do tapered leaders for steelhead. It's absolutely not necessary. There won't be any advantage to throwing a tapered leader on a bobber rig, or on an indie rig, if you will. And the reason for that is you're going to have so many different weights and so many different types of resistance in different places. There's no advantage out of putting a tapered leader on. I carry 4 spools of line. My material, my go-to is copolymer. I've actually used for years and years and years, I've used P-line CCX, and it's a green copolymer.
Is that like just a flat fly line? What is that?
This is would be tippet material.
Okay.
This is not, I'm talking the leader setup, not the fly line
Okay, leader
itself.
section. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
For the fly line, if I could back up to that, I guess, for the fly line, it would be a good weight forward floating fly line that typically has a heavy head and a long, heavy belly. My go-to fly line would be actually, it's a line made for switch rods, but you can throw it on the single handers, and that would be the Rio indicator switch.
Okay.
Rio switch indicator. It's a red and white line. It makes roll casting a breeze. Another good one, maybe for the 9-footers or 10-foot single handers, if you can't get your hands on the switch indicator, would probably be the Scientific Anglers Anadro. Scientific Anglers Anadro, and I would even recommend going one line weight over the rod on that. And again, that's just another line that's got a very thick head and a long, fairly thick belly. And it's all about roll casting with the strike indicator rigs, the bobber rigs. If you're fly casting,
okay,
you're going to tangle a lot. No matter how good of a fly caster you are, think about this. You've got some split shot on there. You've got a big 1-inch or 3/4-inch foam indicator on there. And then you've got the 2 flies on there. And they're all different wind resistance. They're all different weights. And when you're trying to fly cast, they sort of break out uneven and get wonky. When you do the roll cast, they all stay in a solid linear pattern. They all stay in line, and you can flip that thing out and lay it out straight. And that's the way to do it. So roll casting with a heavy fly line. So now coming off of that fly line, I carry 4 spools of the copolymer line that I was talking about, the P line. And I'm just carrying 12, 10, 8, 6. And I would say I rarely get into 10 or 6. 6 would be super clear water. I feel like there's a chance they might be fussy, and I'm fishing some smaller nymphs that don't weigh as much, and I want them to penetrate and sink better with a less resistant line. So I rarely touch the 6, but I keep it. And then I rarely touch the 10. I might beef up to 10 on the end if it's sturdy enough to get away with it. And maybe I've got some newer clients that are struggling a little bit to learn how to fight these fish. I might beef them up to 10. But my standard rig coming off the fly line, you ready for this? It's really, really...
Let's hear it.
You're going to want to get a notepad, man. It's really complex. 9 feet of the 12-pound. And then we're going to come in and we're going to Albright, or whatever your favorite line-to-line connection is. We're going to do a line-to-line connection of the 8-pound, 15 to 16 inches. Tie on a fly, tie to the bend of that, another 15 or 16 inches of 8-pound, and tie your second fly. Right above that knot is where the split shot go. I carry 2 sizes of split shot.
The first knot?
The only knot. Just going from 12 to... It's going from 12 to 8 right there. Yep.
Gotcha.
And that's your shot seat. That's where your split shot are going to sit. And I carry 2 sizes. I carry BBs and I carry 3/0s. And I rarely touch the 3/0s unless it's super deep and fast. I usually just run 1 or 2 BBs. That's it.
Huh.
And my strike indicator is an Oros. I like the Oros strike indicators, the foam balls that are just the 2 halves that screw together.
Yeah, right.
That's the best steelhead strike indicator around, I think.
And you want these flies right on the bottom, is that right?
Near it. In a perfect world, if you're looking at the page here in front of you, left to right, and the water is going from right to left on a piece of paper, I would draw you the indicator up at the top of the water, and the line would be going at an angle down to the bottom to the split shot. So towards the right of the page on an angle, and then your flies would be coming back up at still a heading right angle. So the split shots to get them near the bottom. Sometimes they're hitting the bottom, sometimes they're not. That's why we make so many casts, right? You don't really know what's going on down there, but there's a lot of casting. It's a lot of mending.
Okay.
You had sent me some notes prior to the show. So not to steal your job from you on questions, but before I forget about this, one of your questions to me was, what's the biggest rookie mistake that you see? It's drifts that have drag on them. You got to get that drag-free drift. You got to get a lot of men. I use a lot of stack mends. Some guys on smaller water prefer to high stick, and that's okay. But I prefer a lot of stack mending, stacking the line straight up, 8, 10, 12 feet of straight fly line directly in line with the current above the bobber.
Oh, you do? Okay. And you just keep chucking line, feeding that bobber downstream of you with that? Is that what you're doing?
I'm letting it float naturally. I want that strike indicator to look like I cut the leader with a pair of scissors and it's floating on its own.
Right. And like you're going upstream first and you're letting it swing by you and then you're feeding that line out as it's going
Correct.
downstream?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'll usually run 45 to 45. Cast upstream at about a 45-degree angle and stop the drift at 45 below.
Yeah. Now, I've been with some guys where we just pound the same hole over and over and over, like for an hour. We just start pounding these holes. What's the deal with that? We know there's steelhead in there and we just got to like make them mad by punching them in the nose. Is that what we're doing? Or do you do that?
Well, I've had those days where I get stuck on a hole and stay on it for a variety of reasons, or I might move a lot faster. And that's, again, that could be a conditions based thing. If it's a great hole and I know there's fish in there, I was just there yesterday. There's plenty of fish in there and it's a super good spot. And we got there early in the morning to make sure that we got it first. But let's say that it's December 15th and it's freaking cold, man. Like the water temp's 32 and there's a little bit of slush on it in the morning. It may only take 2 or 3 degrees of an increase in water temperature to get those fish active. But if we start out fishing and nothing's happening, I might assume it's probably that.
Water temps?
Yeah, it could be. I guess I'm giving you an example of why I may continue to pound a hole for a longer period of time. Which is, yeah, if the water temp is lower, but I expect it to come up, maybe it's a sunny day, and I expect it to just come up 2 or 3 degrees by 10 or 11 o'clock, then we might stay there from daybreak for a couple of hours just to make sure that that's all it was. If I'm certain that there's fish in there and that's the only problem.
Right.
Another reason I might stay on a hole is if I expect to push a fish. If I'm getting a push of fish or there's been pushes of fish, particularly that would be on the lower river, like the bottom mile or two of a river. And you can get days where you're sitting there on the same hole doing nothing, and all of a sudden everybody hooks up. It's like 8, 10, 12 fish in a half an hour.
Huh. A bunch of fish just slid in there.
Yep. And then it dries up again. And then you wait another 45 minutes and here they come again. And that can happen a lot with these migratory fish.
How often are you changing flies if you're not getting strikes and you know there's fish in there?
I know guys that do it and it works for them. For me personally, I'm not changing flies a lot.
You fish your rig.
I look at my flow and my water color and I pick my fly based on my water color. And I will likely probably move spots more than I would change flies. I will change locations more in a day than I will change flies for sure.
Interesting. And what temperatures are you looking for?
Well, you can fish them anything between 32 and probably about 60, 62 degrees. I don't like fishing much past even like 64, 65. You're hurting those fish at that point.
Right.
They can be caught, but I don't like doing it. But in a perfect world, 40 to 52 degrees, 40 to 54 degrees in the river, that's like good metabolism, active fish. Those are great water temperatures.
Yeah. So if you're down like just above freezing, can you expect to have a slow day?
Until it comes up just a couple of degrees, and then sometimes it can be lights out. It's funny, 2, 3, 4 degrees in their world in the wintertime. That's like 20 to us. That's like 20 degrees to us. That's like going from a 45-degree morning to a 65-degree afternoon. In their world, 3 or 4 degrees, and it happens almost every day. On an average day, whether it's sunny or cloudy, sunny days it goes up quicker. We commonly have between 6 and 12 degree temperature swings on a daily 24-hour block basis in these rivers.
Yeah, okay. You mean the river temperature?
Yeah, the river temperature is going up and down by somewhere between 4 and 12 degrees on a daily basis.
Wow, no kidding. Did you find that change can get them off the dime and get them moving?
Big time. Like I said, 3 or 4 degrees from a low So let's say, like I said, you show up and the water's 32 degrees and it's December fishing and it's
Yeah.
chilly. If that water 3 hours into the day, the sun's out and that water goes from 32 to 36, it'll absolutely turn it on.
No kidding. What about the other way? In the evening, as it starts to drop, does that turn them off?
It usually doesn't drop until well after dark. It'll kind of stay elevated. It takes some time for it to respond in the morning, and it also takes time for it to respond after dark.
Do you steelhead bite all day long? Or is it like morning, evening is best, like a lot of other types of fishing?
Well, that's on water temperatures again. Morning and evenings are best. Low light is best when you have bright sun and higher temperatures.
Okay.
And then midday steelhead fishing, like noon to 3 o'clock, is best when the water temps are cold.
Makes sense.
So winter trips, just me personally. There's a lot of guides around here, and I'm not knocking their style. I just roll with mine. There's a lot of guides here. When the water's in the 30 in the middle of winter, they're getting out at an hour before daylight because they want their spot. And that's fine. But I typically, when the water's in the 30s, I don't start guide trips before 9 or 9:30 a.m. because the fish aren't probably going to be that active anyway. So there's no reason for me to rush out there and freeze my butt off an hour before daylight standing next to the river.
And you're not going to just stand in one hole all day long either, it sounds like.
No, I'm going to try to get a good hole out of the gate, but then I'm going to start moving anyway. And it's also not uncommon to see on a weekend or a busy day, see everybody head to the river early because they want their spot. And then they're not catching that many fish because it's cold. They just assume the fishing's off. They leave, they go home, and then the river clears out around noon and all the fish start biting.
That's kind of funny. What's a good day for you in Northeast Ohio, and what's a great day for you up there?
Numbers wise, I would say a good day, and this is all just like averages, angler skill set, conditions, numbers of fish to be had, numbers of other people around, right?
You bet.
But I mean, that's just an average good day. If I've got a couple of anglers with me, we're probably going to come up with between 10 and 20 hookups.
Nice.
And then I've had some great days. The best day I've ever had, two good old boys that have been fishing with me for a decade, Hal and Bill. And
Yeah.
I don't know what our numbers were, but I know it's a pretty good day when near the end of the day, one of them comes to you and says, "Hey, give me your net and you take my rod because I want to see what netting them's like."
Yeah.
He had had enough fish. I think we were probably pushing 60, 70 to the net at that point.
That's incredible. Yeah. So I've got a friend who lives in Oregon, and guess where he comes to do his steelhead fishing? Northeast
Probably
Ohio.
Lake Erie. Yeah.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Let's talk about these fish. So what kind of fish do we have? What's the strain of fish we've got in here? What's the history of these guys?
Well, I love history. So let's talk about some history before I get into them specifically. Years ago, we stocked salmon in Ohio in the 80s a lot, and it was mostly kings and also cohos. And we just didn't really get a very good return. States like Michigan and New York were doing great with their steelhead programs in Lake Michigan and Ontario. And in the state of Ohio, we were not. Well, as technology advanced and biologists learned and got better, they started tagging and tracking fish with tags and phone numbers. And then, of course, nowadays we can track fish with microchips and radio tags. But in the 80s, it would have been metal lip tags or sort of
Sure.
like plastic wire tie style tags with numbers you could call and report these fish. And what we found was, because even though these fish, we expect them to imprint a little and come back to the stream that they're stocked in, they're not like wild Western Pacific salmon where they go up the exact river they were born in. They're going to go up the nearest river to wherever their summer habitat is. And
Really?
for those salmon specifically, their summer habitat turned out to be the about 3/4 of the way east in the lake, or maybe more like 4/5 would be a better way to put it. That's the deepest part of Lake Erie. There's a 200-foot deep hole out there, sort of north of Westfield or Dunkirk, New York.
New York.
Yeah, the state of New York, 280 miles away or whatever it is. And because they were all going over there to find, the bait fish, the type of bait fish they eat, and also to find the water depth that they want for the temperature they want, they were just, when the time came in the fall to run, they were just running straight into the nearest rivers, and the majority of them were ending up in Pennsylvania and New York. So we were paying for those fish. We were
Yeah.
paying for those states to have fish essentially by stocking salmon in Ohio. So then a gentleman came along and took a new job. Can't remember exactly what year. I believe right there in the either late 80s or early 90s that a fellow by the name of Kurt Wagner took the job as the lead fisheries biologist for Lake Erie. And Kurt was the one that said, "Hey, the salmon stop now. We're doing these steelhead, aka migratory rainbows." And so we've experimented with a number of strains over the years, as have the other states. And when you say the word strain and fish, it's not a different species. You're literally talking about, it's the same as like dogs, right? The species is dog, terrier or Labrador, or that's the breed, right? So you have to think about the word strain and fish essentially being the same as breed in dogs.
It's like a breed. Yeah, good point.
They all fill different niche roles. They do different things. It doesn't matter if this dude is up some little stream in Western Maryland or West Virginia on a little mountain in a babbling brook somewhere, if he's in Lake Erie, if he's in the Pacific Ocean or in a lake in Alaska or in the North Platte and Casper, Wyoming, he's a rainbow trout. He or she is a rainbow trout. They're all Anchoricus mitis, every one of them. And the different strains just fill different niche roles based on where they live. And so over time, we've developed strains that do different things. And you hear of the fall runs or the spring runs. There's sort of this common misconception that these fish run in the fall, stay all winter, and leave in the spring. That's not the reality. The majority of these fish, you're getting new waves of fish every time you get a high water event. So there's fish that are running the rivers right now that are going to be out of there in the next couple of weeks.
Just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and then more come behind them. The fish that are in that river right now is not the same fish that you're catching in that river in March.
Huh.
Totally different fish.
Is that true, like, in all these Great Lakes systems?
The same thing?
Yeah. Is that true everywhere? Like up in the PM in Michigan, for instance. Same thing? Fish are in and out in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, but it's different. It's a little different with the PM because they're staying longer. They're getting fish a little later than us because they're all pretty much Manistee strain steelhead, which is a winter/spring run fish. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means and why in a second. But those fish in, say, the Manistee, they're going crazy miles on an undammed tributary, way up, and then it takes them a whole lot longer to come back down. Our rivers are also short. A couple of them have dams on them, a couple of them have waterfalls on them. But be it a dam or be it a waterfall or be it that it just gets too small, when you're looking at Michigan too, you're also talking about ground-fed, spring-fed streams.
Right.
So again, like those things have a lot of water in them all year long. These spate streams, these are again short drainages. You look at like some of the branches of the mid-sized tributaries, they just go up to that ridge and drain that rainwater and snowmelt like we talked about earlier. So some of those are only 40 miles long at the longest.
Yeah, they're in.
And there's a couple of these creeks that they can only go 5 miles in and they're out of water.
Huh.
It's too small to go any farther in just 5 or 6 miles.
All these little creeks and streams up and down the shoreline of Lake Erie are getting steelhead running up in them, even though they weren't dumped there as smolt, imprinted, and headed out to sea.
Every single one of them. Every
God,
single
no
one of them. If it goes into Lake Erie, now some are getting more, some are getting less. Your hometown river, the Maumee,
Yeah.
it gets steelhead. It doesn't get many. One, because it's so far west of the lake, there's not a lot of steelhead hanging out in the western basin in the summertime, if any, because it's 30 foot deep out there. So the fish that are going up the Maumee are just fish that were in the area that are lost. These fish are also, some of these fish are moving all through the Great Lakes. I mean, there's certainly steelhead that will swim through Lake St. Clair during the colder months. They're not staying there, but they certainly move through. This is why we every year it never fails. Somebody's going to catch a pink salmon in the Rocky River or Euclid Creek in Ohio. Well, that fish doesn't belong here. It probably came out of the Huron, probably came from the Garden River. It just got lost. So there is absolutely steelhead that go up the Maumee River. Would I go and fish there? No, because it's too big and there's not many.
It is
But
huge.
every single creek that goes into that lake has the possibility of getting these steelhead to go up it.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, one of the things that we were talking about, like the strains, particularly there's fall run and sort of winter spring run. And what makes them do it is just there's a genetic in the fish. With the fall run, what triggers them is when colder water is running into a warmer lake. So you'll start seeing fish when the lakeshore temperatures are near the mid to upper 60s at the most. And the river temperatures, you get those first couple of rains of the year and you get those rivers in like 50, 55 degree range. Here come the fall run steelhead. That's Pennsylvania strain fish, which we call mutts because of the way they breed them. They're not a specific strain at all. They're just back crossed a bunch with basically what Pennsylvania does. They have trout run PA, which you can't fish. There's a weir there, and it's kind of a fascinating place to take a visit because you pull up to the parking lot and this little eighth of a mile long stream that's 35 feet wide will have 800 or 1,000 steelhead sitting in it. And it's the creek that the hatcheries use. So when they get the big runs in the fall, they seine them up, they throw them on a truck, they haul them up to the hatchery, breed them out, and put them back in the lake. So you're just whatever strain comes in, which typically is a fall run strain, that's what they grab. New York and Ohio, Michigan, most of the other Great Lakes steelhead states are using, Canada as well, using specific strains. To name a few, you have summer runs, which we can't do here because we don't have the type of water for it. That's more Lake Michigan has some spring-fed tributaries that can get summer runs, and so there are the Skamania strain is the name of a popular summer run. In the Great Lakes here, more of the fall and spring runs you're going to hear about is Chambers Creek strain, Gonoroskas, and then the Manistee strains, which are in our long time sort of winter/spring run fish. Those are more common names of some of the strains here.
And do different strains want to spawn in the spring or the fall?
Absolutely. They're specific to that. Chambers Creek strain fish, for example, is what's considered a fall run fish, and that's triggered by colder water running into a warmer lake. And then a Manistee strain, which there's no manatees in the river to speak of right now, none that I've seen or heard reported. I've been catching them in the harbors because that's just where they live this time of year, but they're not. The female manatees that I caught last week, they don't even have eggs in them.
No kidding.
They're just a bright chrome elongated fish with no eggs. And what triggers that manistee is when warmer water is running into a colder lake. So just a couple more weeks when the lake's in, say, 38 degrees, and then let's say we get some south wind and we get a warming trend and it's 45 or 50 3 days in a row, and the river temp comes up to 50 degrees and the lake's 38, boom, enter manatees. Here they come.
Oh, it's fascinating. And how many fish does the state stock?
We have been for a long time on an agreement. There's a commission between, for Lake Erie specifically, there's a commission between Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and Canada. And all the biologists get together and have a conference every year and compare numbers, and they're looking at things like bait fish numbers. What can we do? We also, when you're technically introducing a species, this fish doesn't belong here. It does great here, but it's not supposed to be here. We don't want that to interfere with the other species. We want to make sure that it's not interfering with their ability to live their best life in their full capacity. So we have to look at bait fish numbers because, albeit steelhead sort of take up a niche role where they're eating through most of the summer, they're eating a variety of bait fish in places where the others aren't going. They do share throughout most of their life, they do share some food sources, particularly with walleye and the smallmouth. They do share some similar food sources, also with some of the white bass and also with some of the yellow perch. So we don't want those native fish. And the native fish that does belong there, a native salmonid, our only native salmonid that we're trying to bring back is the lake trout. And lake trout are coming back in Lake Erie as we speak. For many years, it's been getting better and better. And we don't
You
want to
want lake
interfere with
trout.
their ability to come back. We want them. We absolutely want them
You do. Why do you want lake trout?
because they belong here.
They belong there. Have lake trout always been in the lake?
Yes, they are absolutely native, historically
Oh, they
native
are.
to the
Okay.
lake. They belong here. The steelhead technically doesn't. So we absolutely want the lake trout. And so the steelhead commissions get together every year and they determine how much bait fish and other food sources, what's going on in the lake, what's the water quality, what can we handle. And typically Ohio's been 500 to 600,000 in its part. Typically most years New York's been between 2 and 300,000. And then Pennsylvania, even though they're tinier creeks in a tinier area, they're usually between 1 and 1.5 million.
What?
And the reason that Pennsylvania gets to stock so much is because they have that stray strain of fish or that straying strain of fish, those mutts, and we benefit greatly off of their stockings. New York and Pennsylvania get a ton of fish. I'm sorry, New York and Ohio get a ton of fish from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So that's why they stock so much. It benefits everything else.
And you can tell these fish that are from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, there's a couple of ID markers that the states leave. So typically, New York clips an adipose fin, Pennsylvania clips a pectoral fin, and the state of Ohio clips the first or second ray of the dorsal fin, typically.
Really?
We don't get every one of them. There's always some that get missed, but you can kind of tell from that. And then an experienced angler, you can tell the strains of these fish by a number of factors: body shapes and fin shape characteristics, and also a little bit of coloration pattern. And I can absolutely tell you the difference between in a river, whether it's a Pennsylvania strain fish, a manistee, or a Chambers Creek fish. Now, I'm going to be right enough to entertain you. I'll probably be right 80% of the time. There's always some that slip through the cracks, particularly with the Pennsylvania strain fish. There's always that fish out there that maybe he didn't get his fin clipped and maybe he came out looking exactly like one or the others.
Yeah.
But as far as true Chambers and true manistee strain steelhead, it's pretty easy to tell those guys apart.
How many times in a lifetime does a steelhead spawn?
They're usually good for 6 years. 6 would be high, 4 to 5. I'd say it's 4 to 5 spawns is more normal. 6 would be kind of high end. 4 to 5 spawns.
And then they just die of old age?
Pretty much. There's a lot of the biggest fish. The reason why you're always going to see a state record out in the lake, there's a lot of those bigger fish that just don't breed anymore. They get one or two more years where they just aren't fertile, and so they just stay out in the lake and keep eating until they die. Which is still maybe maximum 7 or so years. I mean, these are not a long-lived fish. They grow quick and they die out short. They don't die after a spawn like Pacific salmon. They'll get multiple spawns, but they don't have a long lifespan. So, the average steelhead's going to be, 5-6 year lifespan. The average lake trout's probably 30 to 40.
And you've, I think I was talking to you about this. When steelhead are moving up and down the stream, obviously they're moving upstream, their noses are upstream, but I just assume that from time to time steelhead turn around and they're kicking downstream, noses downstream, but you're saying they slide downstream. Is that right?
Yeah, unless they're in a hurry, they're typically kind of just, when you see them dropping back, they're literally just kind of dropping back. They'll just sort of sort of lay up a little bit on pushing their little rudder, and they'll just kind of slip down the riff one into the next hole and then hang out there for a little and then down to the next one. I have seen some on a full on all out mass exodus. Probably one of the saddest years I ever saw was 21. I can't remember exactly on this. I'd have to look, so I may get the date wrong. So, but for the sake of the show, I'll just say that without looking back into my pictures for notes. But there was a year, I think it was spring of 2021. It got warm and dry really fast, way more normal, way more fast than normal. And in fact, I canceled all steelhead trips on April 9th due to low water and high water temperatures. And that was the only time I ever remember. We were on the Middle Grand River, and I'll never forget just seeing good numbers, like visible good numbers of fish that were plowing nose first downstream trying to get out of there.
Really?
And a lot of them didn't make it because the river temperature went in a period of 5 days it went from 54 to 72 degrees.
Yeah, that won't be good. Can you fish for steelhead, what, from November all the way through what, March, April? Is it good all winter?
The first fish that you'll see anywhere in Steelhead Alley typically are in Pennsylvania, some in Ohio and New York as well. It's going to be the bottoms of the rivers, maybe the first couple of riffles in, and you're going to see those fish show up as early as October 1, give or take. You don't have consistent numbers on any given year usually until the middle of November. And then on the others, and then they're in and out of there all winter. As long as it's not frozen up, you can fish them. And then that will go until on an average year, sometime around the end of April.
Oh, that long.
Yeah, sometimes the end of April. I mean, there's people that catch. I know a guy who caught one year. It was like May 27th, and he was smallmouth fishing.
Yeah.
It was a cooler spring, and there was just one that was lost and stuck in there. But that's, if you're looking for steelhead in May, you're not going to have a lot of fun doing it. That's not saying they're not in there.
Probably not the best.
We have two peak seasons. We have a fall peak season and a spring peak season. And a fall peak season for me is the last 3 weeks of November, the first 2 weeks of December. And the spring peak season would be pretty much the entire month of March and the first week of April. Those are the two peak seasons here.
Yeah. Now, Josh, you've been a guide for a long, long time, but you've done some other things too before you kind of figured out that you had to be a guide. What else did you do?
Oh man, my history prior to guiding is a mix of driving trucks and doing some construction stuff.
Yeah. And then how did you decide, man, I got to be a guide?
Well, my whole life's been fishing. I don't remember a time when I didn't fish. I've dabbled, and I used to hunt. I haven't hunted in several years, not because I don't like it anymore or don't think it's a good thing. If you're going to be a professional guide and you want to be successful, you don't have time to hunt.
You're fishing.
I see some of these other guides that take time off to hunt, and if they can do that and they can afford it or whatever, I don't know. I got a wife and 2 kids, so
Yeah.
for me, this is farming. Guiding is like farming. You got to make hay when the sun shines. And I just don't peak seasons for me in the spring and the fall are peak like turkey and deer seasons as well. And I just don't have time to take time off. I don't schedule days off. I take every booking I can in the peak seasons. And for me, and it's not for everybody, but for me, I just felt like, man, if I could figure out a way to make my living on the water doing what I love, I was going to go after it because I just knew I wasn't going to be truly happy doing anything else.
Yeah.
And I'll say this to anybody that's listening to your show, if they think that maybe they want to be a guide, there's 2 things that you can't care about or like if you want to be a guide. One of them's money, and the other one's actually fishing.
No. Oh, man.
If you're good with that, I think for me, I get a lot of young guys that ask me like, how do I do this? How do I get into this? What's it take to be a guide? You just got to really be the best fisherman or whatever. I've got clients that I promise you could outfish me, fish circles around me. They can outcast me. They can outfish me. It's not about necessarily being the fishiest guy out there. You have to know your stuff. You can be the fishiest guy or gal, but you won't make a great guide if you don't have one thing. And this is where I stop most of these young folks in their tracks, is when I tell them that you have to have a burning desire inside of you for your client to catch that fish more than you'd want to catch it yourself.
Yeah.
I can go out and catch a 30-inch fish tomorrow and I would think that's pretty cool. Probably wouldn't even take a picture of it. But if I put you on that fish and that was the biggest steelhead or rainbow trout you'd ever caught, Steve, you're going to see me shout. It's going to be like being at a football game. I'm going to be screaming, "Oh yes!" Like, I mean, I'll get pumped, and I get really pumped. I go from like the calmest, coolest guy out there to like screaming, shouting the victory, all the woohoos, and it's never gotten old for me. I get my high from fishing off of my clients catching something special, watching them catch a first or make a memory. I just had a husband and wife yesterday in their early 30s. He has been dabbling a little bit. He's getting better, but he's got some experience. She pretty much has no experience with the fly rod to speak of, and she just caught her first 2 yesterday. and just watching her smile ear to ear, and
Yeah.
me and him both standing behind her and watching her reel that fish in, watching her be so nervous and afraid to break the line, and then the smile that came across her face when that first fish got inside the
Yeah.
net basket. It was that's what does it for me. I've watched countless kids and new people and even older folks that it's getting tougher. They fished their whole lives, and it maybe takes a special situation. And hey, is there somewhere you can get me? And I can only walk a quarter mile, and I can't do steps, and I can't do hills. And so you go through the math, and you're like, man, I got one shot here. I got a spot I can get this dude. The oldest client I've ever had catch a fish, he was 86 years old
Nice.
when he caught a 32-inch steelhead. And to see him grinning and happy that he was still able to be out there just doing the thing. He fished with his son and his grandson that day, and he didn't catch the most fish. He did get the biggest. But the fact that you could just tell that a guy at that age just appreciates the ability to still be out there and have a chance, that's what does it for me.
That's awesome. So where'd you grow up, Josh?
In Utica, Ohio, right in the middle of the state. You can't get much more middle other than a
Okay.
town called Centerburg, which is 15 miles from there. It's right in the middle. And I grew up doing I didn't start steelhead fishing right away. I grew up more on local streams. And in fact, when I started getting into the guide business, and 15 years ago, I started a company called North Fork Outfitters, or a business, I should say. It wasn't much of a company, but a business. My guide service was North Fork Outfitters, named after the North Fork of the Licking River, which is the creek that was closest to me growing up, where I cut my teeth learning how to river fish for smallmouth.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of funny because I've now come full circle back to North Fork Outfitters just very recently after going to a couple other places.
Okay. That's the name of your company now, North Fork Outfitters. Just a quick note here, folks. Josh tells me he's actually sticking with his Fish Ohio Outfitters company name if you want to get in touch with him.
Yep. I started that, and then I went to work for a guy steelheading. After I started steelhead fishing a little bit, and I decided I wanted to guide for steelhead. I started guiding with a fella that used to run a little company called Rob's Guide Service, which is long gone now, and it was sort of a kind of a budget guide service. We used to charge $120 a day for one person and $150 for two.
Really? How many years ago was that?
13 and a half.
1920?
Yeah, 12, 13 years ago.
Not like 1972?
Yeah, I made no money. It was a side job,
No.
and it was like you just prayed that somebody'd give you a good tip, because I basically
Right.
made no money doing that. I look back at it as sort of a paid internship, and then it kind of got my name out
Yeah.
there, and then
There you go.
it got me an opportunity. After that, I left, and I went. I spent 10 years with my friends down at Mad River Outfitters in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
Big fly shop. I'm sure you've heard of them. They've been around for a long time, and it's a great, absolutely awesome shop with some great people there, and a couple of my best friends still work there, and spent 10 great years there, and then just decided to make some different moves and
Do it on your own.
yeah, did it on my own. And so now I'm back to North Fork Outfitters, doing a variety of things that I've always done with the steelhead and the lake now, and do a lot of inland smallmouth trips and a lot of pike trips still, pike on the fly
nice.
here in a couple of rivers as well.
So being from Central Ohio, let me guess, you're a Buckeye fan.
Absolutely. So
Another
remember
one.
how I told you that I don't take days off in the peak season?
Yeah, you did say that.
Outside of Thanksgiving, there's only one day I schedule off in the entire fall steelhead season, and that's
Michigan,
Saturday
Ohio
after
State.
Thanksgiving. I never book that day. I won't book that day. That's a religious holiday in my house.
We got Michigan, Ohio State coming up here this weekend, don't we?
We do. Yep. I'm awful nervous.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So when you were in high school, you're a big guy, right? Did you play football?
I didn't, man. I fished.
You fished.
I could have. Yep. I could have. A lot of people said you could have been a football player. I'm 6'2" and 280, and probably could have been a defensive lineman or even an offensive lineman, but In high school, I wasn't quite as big, but tall. I probably could have been a tight end or something in high school, but
The coach is probably walking by in the halls and going, dude, why aren't you playing football?
yeah, and not coming anywhere near me because I probably smelled like fish. So,
So if your high school voted, what would they say you'd be most likely to become?
well, I don't know because there's the other thing. I actually didn't go to public school. I was homeschooled. So,
Oh, you were? Okay.
yeah, which was really cool for me because with homeschoolers, what a lot of people don't know is like with the school system in public school, it's set up to take the whole day, right? Like, get your different classes, periods, or whatever. Well, with homeschool, if you work hard and learn hard, you've got the exact same level of curriculum that you have to learn. It's all state certified and
Right.
federally certified by the Department of Education curriculum. My mom always had to send in the tests at the end of the year. We do the standardized tests just like everybody else and whatnot. But the nice thing was is like you had your daily lessons and learning. You had your volume of work that had to be done. Whether that took you 8 hours or 4, that was up to you. And so in high school, I would just work hard really hard. And if I had lessons on something I understood or did really well and got my tests all filled out and everything put away and all the homework done for mom to check later when she got back from work, I would run out the door and go fishing.
Is that right? Oh my
Yep.
gosh. That's
Hmm.
fantastic. Man, you got the DNA, you got the gene. It's in you.
It's been my whole life, man, from grandpa and dad taking me up to Lake Erie and when I was a kid, and grandpa and dad would take me to numerous farm ponds when I was really young, or maybe the
Yeah.
river, and I loved it. I was always begging to go fishing. Well, then when they had been taking Lake Erie trips for walleye for years on grandpa's 18-foot tri-hull Rinker built boat that he had,
Oh my gosh.
and I was 11 years old. Well, actually, I was 10 years old when I asked to go. They said no. Then I rolls around. I was 11 years old, and I was begging, begging, begging. And my dad's like, no, he ain't going to last the first hour up there. And my mom's like, just do it one time. And if he doesn't like it or he complains, then he doesn't get to go for 4 or 5 years. Well, I ended up complaining that day. And the only thing I complained about was when it was 2:30 and it was time to leave, and I wanted to stay and fish.
You're one of those guys, man. That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, I was the same way. Couldn't get enough of it. I'm telling you, I was the first guy on the water, last guy off the water. Love it. Good for you. What's your favorite shore lunch? Do you do shore lunches when you take clients fishing?
I do lunches now on the boats.
Yeah.
If we're walking and waiting, because of gear and room and everything, we typically either maybe pack sandwiches or snacks, jerky, crackers, fruit snacks, stuff like that, whatever you can fit in the bag. But on the drift boat trips, or typically on the drift boat trips, what I've been doing is I have a little grill that fits in my dry box, which is sort of the front seat for the
Oh,
drift
nice.
boat, and
Yeah.
so we do a lot of Johnsonville bratwurst, man.
Is that right?
with
Brats.
with the
Okay.
Cleveland Stadium mustard and all that. We do a lot of
Okay.
brats or sometimes some chicken tacos, or I mix it up. And then of course on the bigger boat on the lake, I mean, I could cook on that boat or break out sandwiches, but you don't get the full experience up there if you don't dock the boat up on the island with the music playing and the
Yeah.
waterfront view. So that's typically what we do when we're on the lake.
What's your favorite place for the hungry, thirsty angler at the end of the day or maybe at lunchtime? Where do you like to go?
Well, if we're gonna look at steelhead, right? For me, the steelhead doesn't get any better than the Loft at Geneva on the lake.
The Loft. Okay.
Yep, I would say the Loft. They got the best wings. They got great pizza, good subs. The Loft is a favorite place for us to go. That's more of a dinner time after fishing, or maybe we're staying
Yep.
for a couple of days. And then also probably Caps Pizza just outside of Paynesville. We go to Caps almost every Tuesday night we can. A lot of the guides get there. There's a group of us guides from different services that are still all buddies and all work together, and we get there on Tuesday nights because they have $1.99 spaghetti, and meatballs are
Okay.
only 89 cents, and it's really
89 cents a piece.
good. The 89 cents per meatball. I don't know how they're doing it. I
Is that
don't
right?
care. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, you could have a lot of meatballs and have a $6, bowl of spaghetti in front of you. That sounds pretty good.
Yep.
You mentioned Kelly's Island. Where's that?
So Kelly's is in the island complex on the western end of the lake.
Kind of near Sandusky.
Yep. Be north of Sandusky, right straight north of Sandusky. The biggest island in Ohio is Kelly's Island.
Yeah.
And I'd say my favorite lunch spot there would be Dockers at Portside Marina because it's right on the water, and they have a killer lobster roll.
Okay. There you go. So another question for you. Did they film Tommy Boy in Sandusky?
I don't know if they did or not. I know that it's supposed to be there. I don't know if they actually filmed it there.
It's got to be one of my favorite movies.
Callahan Auto Parts.
Callahan, that isn't there, huh? You never seen Callahan Auto Parts in Sandusky?
I don't think there's actually a Callahan Auto Parts, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably not. Somebody came and painted that on the building just for the show, I'm sure. Anyway. Hey, man, Josh, it was great having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Steve, absolutely. It was great to talk to you and look forward to fishing with you at some point.
I know. We tried to work this out. We were going to do this live from the stream, but we just couldn't get it figured out. It was weather related. So anyway, but yeah, we'll have to make that happen. Well, Josh, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, it's pretty easy, Steve. Really, the best way is just to go to fishohioutfitters.com, and we've got our email and our phone number on there. If they want to just go direct to email, that's pretty easy to remember, too. It's just fishohioutfitters@gmail.com.
That's pretty easy. All right, folks, there you go. Get a hold of Josh if you want to book a trip. Well, and you've got a nice Instagram page, too. It's Josh?
Yeah, it's Josh McQueen Fishing. So it'd just be Josh_McQueen_fishing. And people can reach out to me through there. I'm also on Facebook as well. I use Facebook mostly for Marketplace. So I don't really post a ton of content on Facebook, but I do use it for Marketplace and Messenger. So they can contact me through Facebook or Instagram.
Sounds good.
On Facebook, it's just Josh McQueen.
Okay, perfect. Well, listen, I wish extraordinary success in all your adventures to follow, Josh. And folks, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Destination Angler podcast. We'll be sure to post Josh's contact info in the Destination Angler show notes and pictures of his top fly picks and probably a lot of big steelhead on our Facebook and Instagram pages. You can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shaig50@gmail.com. If you like the show, please share it with a buddy. As always, our music is by Brothers Fountain, an awesome little band out of Colorado. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.